Welcome to this week's online learning for science. And this week we're going to be looking at science in the news, so how science is communicated, particularly in relation to vaccines and pathogens, the things we've been looking at. Through this work you will complete page 40 of your booklet, and you'll also be completing a research task. In terms of what we're looking at this week, we will be exploring and looking to understand the importance of vaccination programs, and we'll be looking at how vaccines can provide protection for both individuals and the wider population. So how it's important not only for you but also for other people around you. The first part of your task was to watch a video on Henrietta Lacks and what's seen as the first line of immortal human cells. Her cells were and still are hugely important in the development of vaccines and research into vaccines. And hopefully you got a feeling for that from that video. So Henrietta's cells were used to develop a vaccine for polio. They were the first cells to go into space to see how human cells reacted to zero gravity. They've even been used to develop the most recent COVID-19 vaccine. So even up to today, her cells were taken back in the 50s without her consent. They're still used in today's modern medicine to develop vaccines. They're hugely, hugely important. And it's incredible really when you look at the history of it to think those cells were taken without her consent, without the knowledge of her family. Her family didn't actually find out until the 70s. It was so much later. They didn't even know that the mother's cells were being used for these purposes. The family have never received any monetary payment for anything, which when you think about pharmaceutical companies, how huge they are, they do make money out of medicine and vaccines. And considering how fundamental her cells are, you might question as to whether that's right, that her family still struggle to pay for their own healthcare, because in America you do have to pay for healthcare. They're not as lucky as we are in Scotland to get free NHS care. So lots and lots of questions that were hopefully stimulated through watching that video. If anyone enjoys reading, there is a book called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. It was also made into a film. Can highly recommend the book. I haven't seen the film, but the book is fab. So if anyone likes reading and would like to find out more about that, then please do. But that gave you a bit of an insight into how vaccines are developed in terms of how they're tested on cells before they're put into live subjects. So that was an example of perhaps science not communicating very well, not getting information out to the public or to people that it should have done. We're now looking at examples where information has come out, but that's potentially caused some problems. So some vaccine programs have been seen to be controversial due to potential side effects. So on the right-hand side here, we have an article from The Sun from 2013. This is an actual news article from the time, which says that the MMR jab, so the measles, mumps and rubella vaccination, was shown to have a link to autism. Because of this news story, there were many parents who decided that they didn't want to get their children vaccinated against measles, mumps and rubella because they were worried there was a risk that their children would develop autism. Now, before we go any further, I do want to say that it is not an issue to have autism, and autism is, like many things, a spectrum. You can have very mild autism up to very kind of obvious symptoms of autism, and it's not an issue. It's just people's brains working differently, people communicating differently, responding in different ways. So I want to make it very clear that autism is not a bad thing per se, but it can make your life more complicated, and if you can make your life simpler, then often people do want to do that. They don't want to overcomplicate the lives of their children if they don't have to. So many people decided not to vaccinate their children against measles, mumps and rubella because of this news article. I can tell you it was fake news, as Trump would say. So research was done which showed that actually this was not true. So the Sun had reported this in good faith. They had seen this information, they had believed it to be true, and they had reported on it believing it was the truth. But it was later shown to be fake news. The research was looked into by other scientists, more studies were done, and nobody else found a link between measles, mumps and rubella and autism. And in fact, the person who publicised the link, who did the initial research, was a gentleman called Andrew Wakefield, and he was struck off as a doctor as a result. So he had misinterpreted the information and misreported a link between the MMR vaccine and autism. And the NHS, even to today, you can see this is a much later publication, this is 2019, they are still having to tell people that the MMR jab does not lead to autism. There is no link between the two. But as a result, there is a generation of people who potentially weren't vaccinated against measles, mumps and rubella. So that Sun story was from 2007. So you might think, well, that was a long time ago. I'm sure that kind of thing doesn't happen nowadays. Well, these are all recent posts in relation to the COVID-19 vaccine. And all of these are talking about a link between getting the COVID vaccine and infertility. So what that means is these people are warning you that if you get the COVID-19 vaccine, you potentially won't be able to have children later in life. I can tell you that they are wrong. Okay, there is no link between the COVID-19 vaccine and infertility, but this is an example of how people can be misinformed and how they can spread that misinformation. So information is coming out about a vaccination, and there are people who are against the vaccination because they believe that there is a bad side effect, and that side effect in this case is infertility. So those online articles received a lot of press attention in terms of a panic and thinking, is there a link between COVID-19 vaccine and infertility? But there have since been many publications from all over the globe saying that these links are false. And it's really important when you're looking at information, particularly online, to find it from multiple sources. So you can see here I've got just a few examples from multiple sources from different places. You can get some that are medical, some that are news. You will be able to get academic papers as well. So using information from different sources is much more reliable, and if ever you see any kind of information online, you shouldn't trust the first thing that you read. It may be true, but make sure you go and find a different source from somewhere else to say, are they saying the same thing? Is everybody saying the same thing about this piece of information? Or is it that there's just a small group of people that believe one thing and a much larger group of people that believe another? And the chances are the thing that has more people saying it is the thing that is true. It's not to say that there aren't any side effects of vaccines. There definitely are, but most of the common side effects that you see after vaccination are very mild. So things like pain or swelling, a bit of redness or a lump where you got the injection, a mild fever, chills, feeling tired as your body gets used to the vaccination, headaches, muscles and joint aches. None of these things are life-threatening. Even if people experience these side effects, they're normally quite short-lived. And they're actually often a sign that your body's starting to build up immunity. A lot of people, when they get ill, will actually get a mild fever. And a mild fever is your body raising your temperature to try and kill off those pathogens that are in the body that it knows shouldn't be there. So it's a very natural reaction and not something to panic about. You can get serious side effects. There are serious side effects that you can get from vaccines, but they are incredibly rare. So they're said to be 1 in 1 million. So that means if 1 million people got a vaccination, then one of those people may have serious side effects. So for most people, getting vaccinated is much safer and much less of a risk than any side effects you would get from catching the disease. So the disease itself is much more dangerous to you than the rare chance of having a reaction. So on page 40 of your booklet, you have these short questions to fill in. So you need to give 2 examples of vaccine programs, explain why vaccine programs are carried out, and explain why vaccine programs can be controversial. So pause the video now, fill in those questions, and then unpause once you're done. So let's have a look at this. Question 1. 2 examples of vaccine program. Now you may have different ones to me, but some examples could be MMR, which is one we spoke about, measles, mumps, rubella. Flu is another example, that would be 2. You could also have HPV vaccination. You saw that in the Henrietta Lacks video. Meningitis could be another one to be vaccinated against. COVID-19, you could have all sorts of different things on there. Why are vaccination programs carried out? Well, they're carried out to give immunity against pathogens. So immunity against those diseases like the flu, like measles, mumps, rubella. And why can they be controversial? Because some people believe they have bad side effects. So here we've got some comments about vaccinations, pros and cons. So a pro is something positive, is a benefit, and a con is something negative, so something against, a reason against having vaccinations. So what I'd like you to do is have a read through these statements and have a think, which ones do you think are positive statements and which ones do you think are negative statements? And that may change depending on your viewpoint. There is not necessarily a right or a wrong answer. So for example, let's look at this one down here. Vaccines are tested on animals before humans. Now, if you are a vegan, an animal lover, anyone who cares for animals in any way, you may think, well, I think that's a bad thing because we're testing things on animals. Looking at it from another viewpoint, if you tested it on humans first, those humans could die. So is it better to test on animals and check that things are safe before we put them into humans? Or is it wrong because we shouldn't be testing on animals? I'm not saying which one of those is right or which one of those is wrong. It's a matter of opinion. So pause the video now. If you've got any friends or family, anyone at home with you, anyone around you who you could discuss that with, then by all means have a chat with them. Pause the video now, read the statements, and have a think about whether you think they are positive statements or negative statements, and then unpause the video to continue. So you are now, having thought about that, you're going to conduct your own research. This is your third part of the task for this week. So your research task is to look into the 2 different viewpoints in terms of one group of people thinking vaccination programs are safe and that everyone should get vaccinated, they're a good thing, and the opposite point of view, which is that vaccination programs are unsafe and they have bad side effects. And these people can also, you might have heard the term recently, anti-vaxxers, people who are against vaccines. So there is a template online, it looks like this, a Word document. The first part, the point of view, has been filled in for you already. So on this side of the sheet, you're going to fill in information for people who are pro-vaccinations, who think vaccinations are safe. And at the other side of the scale, on the other side of the page, we've got spaces for people who think vaccinations are unsafe, okay, so anti-vaxxers as they're known, and that they're unsafe and they had bad side effects. Now, there are not necessarily black and white on this topic, but we're going to look at these two extremes. So the one extreme where they think, yep, vaccines are all fine and we don't need to worry, and the other end of the spectrum where we say, well, vaccines are quite bad and we don't trust them actually. So what you're going to do, you're going to look for reason for these opinions. So why do these people think vaccinations are safe, and why do these people think vaccinations are not safe? And you'll write in each of the boxes over here. You're then going to look for the evidence. So what evidence do these people have that vaccinations are safe? And what evidence do these people have that vaccinations are unsafe? And then you are going to, at the bottom, put down any sources. So when you are looking for this information, what sources did you use? So you might have a list of websites in here. You might have spoken to family members who have opinions, or friends who have opinions on these things. You're just going to write down the sources in here. So that might be a website, or it might be, you know, I spoke to an aunt or something like that. On the bottom of the template, this is a really important bit. We want to know your opinion. What is your opinion? And there is no right or wrong answer because it is an opinion. So are you for or against vaccines? Do you think they're good, or do you think they're bad? Or you might have an opinion that's somewhere in the middle. The important thing is to give a reason why. Why do you think that? Why are you for vaccines, or why are you against vaccines based on the research that you have done? So that is the third and kind of main part of your task for this week. So take your time to do the research, get your information from multiple sources. We've already seen that there are some unreliable sources on the internet. So if you're using the internet, make sure you access more than one website to get your information. Once you have completed that template, you'll then submit that through the assignments page to your class teacher. So by the end of this week, once you've completed that research task, you should hopefully understand the importance of vaccination programs and should be able to explain how vaccines can provide protection for both individuals and populations. If you have any questions about the work this week, please do get in touch with your class teacher, whether it's to do with the material or how to complete the tasks, and we look forward to seeing all of your work.